When you're in medicine for over 3 decades, you hear miracle stories. But I want to share a personal miracle story with you. My son, my oldest son, Dylan, when he was first born, we were so excited about him, as we are with all our children. But one of the things that we noticed about Dylan and always commented is his eyes were constantly moving. And what we saw in that as his parents is, wow, he is so curious about the world around him. He's looking at everything. But when I took him to his 2-month checkup, and my friend who was the pediatrician finishes the exam, he turns to me and he said, "I'm so sorry to tell you this, but I believe that Dylan is blind." You see, that movement was not because he was looking at something. He was looking at nothing. And so he had nowhere to focus his eyes. That was one of the most devastating days of my life, if not the most devastating. I remember driving home and calling my husband and just beyond myself and trying to explain that our son was blind. And I felt so guilty as his mother, a doctor, that I hadn't seen it before. Was there anything that I could have done for him that I had missed? That was the beginning of a journey of seeing specialists at a university in South Carolina, ultimately going to Duke, and hearing that our son was in fact blind. And the reason for his blindness was that the brain was not processing the images that his eyes were seeing, and they didn't expect it to get better. Of course, we were devastated. Anytime we hear such terrible news, especially about our children, we just can't imagine what their future will be like. But with time, my husband and I began to process, well, at least we can have him in schools where he'll be with other children that are blind. And there are so many people that have gone on to do amazing things despite their blindness. And life continued. But during that time, my husband had also come to faith in Christ. And I wasn't there. But he brought me to church on one Sunday morning, and I said, well, only if we sit at the back. And in the middle of the church service, the pastor calls us to the front. And I just remember being so upset with my husband of like, why is he doing this? I just wanted to shrink into my seat. But we came to the front of the church, and he asked the church members to pray for our son. And we left that day, and I honestly didn't have any hope, because my hope wasn't in the Lord. But my husband prayed. And that afternoon we got home, and I was getting lunch ready, and I hear my husband shouting, "Pamela, come here. Pamela, come here." I remember so clearly. And I run in there thinking something terrible is wrong. But he was at Dylan's changing table, and he was showing me that with his tie that he had worn to church, that our son was now focusing on the stripes in the tie. And where we had tried so many things to See if Dylan would focus from balloons to fire to loud noises and places. This was the first time that those little eyes looked at something, and he moved it around, and he would, with his little shaky head, move with it. We went back to the doctors, and they couldn't believe it. But you see, that was not the end. At that point, his vision was about 20/400. Good enough to see some things. But he had to have a lot of adaptation through the years. But we knew in our hearts, and especially once I came to know the Lord, I knew what God had done. And we always told him about the miracle that he was given and we were given. But as he approached the age for driving, unbeknownst to us, he had been praying that God would heal him even further. And on a Wednesday night church service, when my husband was the elder at the church, they asked for those who wanted prayer. And my son was the first to walk up and kneel before his dad and say, I need prayer to be able to drive. Can you imagine the tears that occurred during that prayer? Really, for everyone in our church. Not long thereafter, we went back to Duke, and we had him tested again for what his vision would be for driving. Is it even possible? And my son's vision was 20/40. Well within the safety for driving. Dylan experienced the second part of that miracle. And we celebrate it today. He's now a computer engineer where he needs his eyes all the time. And we are so grateful. We're so grateful for God giving us that miracle. Keep praying for yours, and I will too. Yeah. I know.
So he's been fine since he was 16?
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
He drives. He is on his computer all the time because he's a programmer. Yeah. But that's not the craziest miracle story I've ever heard.
But it's the most personal, I'm sure.
Yes. I'm going to change shirts, and I got the craziest miracle story I've ever heard.
Oh, wait, is this a miracle shirt?
Huh?
Is this the miracle shirt?
Should we wear the miracle shirt and all?
I feel like they should, I don't know,
Do you need something to eat? Have you eaten?
yes. Do we have more batteries in Quebec?
What do you call her?
Auntie Beck.
Auntie Beck.
You can wear whatever you want. I don't think it has to be like a specific.
I think I'll change.